Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Today we have one more set of great revenge stories, but before we start, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. And our first story. Your lease is still valid, even though you were evicted? Okay. I'm the landlord of some apartments in the city. I sign the lease agreements and go over the basics with tenants. Although they don't usually want me to spend hours delving into the fine print, 99% of the time it's a breeze and everything's fine. One lady, let's call her Karen, had been paying her rent via a new bank account and new checks for the last several months. All of a sudden, we got several chargeback fees on our account. She'd put a stop payment on the checks and closed the account. I immediately called her. Me. Hey, Karen, it looks like your checks bounced for the last few months. Just wanted to make sure everything's okay. Oh no, I promise, I'll get this fixed. Okay, you've been a good tenant in the past, so I'll give you a month. Needless to say, a month passed and she didn't pay, so I called her again. Hey, Karen, we still haven't received payment, so I'm afraid we'll have to file for eviction. Oh, God, no, I'm an old woman. I can't afford to be evicted. I'm trying so hard to pay. Can you give me another shot? As long as you pay before the court date, the eviction doesn't have to go through. Court date arrives, and guess who hasn't paid yet? At court, the judge rules for a 24-hour notice to vacate. Karen, in tears, comes up to me afterwards. Can you please give me another chance? I can't afford to go anywhere else. I'm sorry, Karen, but the only way I could do that is if you paid off the debt, signed a new lease agreement, plus first month's rent, plus new security deposit, and I don't think that's going to happen. Goodbye. So I left, and I thought that was that. My maintenance guy would come in a few days later to do the inspection and clean up, and then we'd put it on the market. He shows up a few days later, and there's a problem. They're still there. So I call the sheriff to schedule a set-out. A problem, though. According to the sheriff, the 24-hour notice was no longer valid, as we'd struck up a deal afterwards, so the court had reversed the eviction decision. I had no recollection of having decided that this would happen. I called the court, and they informed me that the eviction was no longer valid, as apparently I told the sheriff that I was giving her more time, invalidating the decision, etc. What happened was, Karen had called the sheriff and told him that the court had reversed the decision, because of a non-existent deal. She then called the court and told them that the sheriff could not evict her, as I'd waived the notice, and she'd used my words, twisting my denial of an extension into a deal. I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. I sent Karen a copy of a new lease agreement asking for the debts in addition to rent for the first month and a new security deposit. Her lawyer then contacted me. Yes, she had the money to hire a lawyer, somehow informing me, in fact, her old lease agreement was still valid as my deal, the one that would require a new lease agreement, invalidated the eviction decision. So I filed for eviction on the grounds that she'd not paid for several months. Now 5 to be exact, and therefore had invalidated her old lease agreement. And then I read her old lease agreement. I already know these contracts pretty well, but like I said, I don't usually delve into the minutia. This time I did. We show up at court, Karen has her lawyer, Karen is bursting, grinning like a fool like she's won the lottery. Her lawyer looks fairly happy as well. The judge asks me to speak. Me. I would like Karen to leave the apartments, but she's refusing, despite the fact that according to the court's last decision, she should have left over a month ago now. Judge. And Miss Karen? Lawyer. Miss Karen cannot be ejected from her home without a new notice. Yes, she's not paid past due rent. However, she and the landlord struck up a deal, giving her the time she needed to pay via verbal agreement. This deal, made directly after the last court date, invalidated the last decision, so Miss Karen will require a new decision, and therefore a new notice, before she can rightfully be evicted from her home. Until then, her lease agreement is still valid. Insert legal crap. Judge. And landlord, what do you have to say? Me. Well, Your Honor, I have to agree. They have made a very compelling argument. Karen and I did indeed make a deal, giving her the time she needed to pay. And yes, her old lease agreement is still valid, I guess. Well, according to the terms of the still valid lease, there are some additional things that the court needs to be aware of that I'd like to go over for clarification. I'm sure you have a copy, Your Honor. Judge. Yes, I do. Me. And you have a copy, lawyer? Lawyer. Yes, I do. Me. Excellent. Well, Your Honor, if you look at Section 4, subsection A on page 2, you will see that after 10 days of non-payment, a late fee of $100 is applied. If you continue reading to subsection B, you will see that after 15 days of non-payment, additional late fees of $1 per day are applied until full payment is rendered. If you continue to subsection C, you will see that failed payments necessitate a chargeback fee of $50 per failed payment. If you will continue, Your Honor, to page 4, section 7, subsection F, you'll see that if a tenant is in any way responsible for a loss of rent, including leaving an apartment in less than move-in ready condition, failed payments, or lastly, refusal to vacate in case of an eviction, the tenant is responsible for payment of said loss of rent, in addition to any other debts owed. In addition, on page 8, section 14, subsection A, you'll note that the tenant is responsible for any and all legal fees resultant from the eviction process, including attorney's fees, such as for the attorney I hired to help me review this lease agreement. Finally, on page 10, the last page, section 17, subsection 8, you'll see that the tenant is responsible for all HVAC services rendered on their unit. As we sent in a company to fix the unit in Karen's apartment at her request, we have the invoice here for the replacement unit in addition to the totals for all of the fees listed. At this point, the lawyer has gone completely pale. It's clear that he was more concerned that I would fight the whole deal thing than the terms of the lease he thought he'd have to fight to keep valid. Karen looks utterly shell-shocked, her mouth slightly agape, like a child confused by a game of peekaboo. The judge, meanwhile, is completely unfazed until I hand her the invoice alongside my math, a spreadsheet, and a piece of paper with the total debt owed circled and highlighted at the bottom of the page. Her eyes widened to the size of her mouth as her jaw dropped with an audible gasp. Me. As you can see, Your Honor, the total owed is in excess of $16,000. I will happily accept payment in the form of a cashier's check. I'd hate to have to charge yet another $50 fee for failed payment should another personal check bounce. Judge. Lawyer, do you have anything to say? At this point, the lawyer looks like he's about to pass out. Karen seems to have stopped breathing. The judge remains silent for a moment and then collects herself. Judge. I'm afraid you'll have to address that matter of debt in a different court than this one. Landlord, we're here only to judge whether Miss Karen is to be evicted from her home today. Me. Oh, if she wants to stay, I'd be happy to let her, as long as she agrees to continue to abide by the terms of the lease agreement, specifically those clauses outlined above, and pays the debt owed today. Judge, I'm going to rule for a 24-hour notice to vacate unless Miss Karen can produce payment at this moment. Karen sits still, quiet, speechless even. Her lawyer is eyeing the window. I like to think contemplating his decisions in life that have led him to this point. Maybe thinking about jumping. I don't know. Judge. Right. 24-hour notice to vacate. And landlord? Me. Yes? You'll want to file those charges in a small claims court or a higher court if it exceeds the amount that you can legally pursue in small claims. Already filed, Your Honor. The case has now been resolved, and needless to say, I got a fairly significant bonus in addition to a slight raise. And our second story. Dumb neighbors think there aren't any consequences to destroying our hedge. So this happened a few years ago. In front of my house, there's a hedge which was previously owned by the city I live in. The hedge is pretty big and expensive to maintain. Seeing as it was expensive to maintain, the city wanted to get rid of it. They gave the streets two options: either turn the hedge into grass, or it was given to the nearest household, the one of my family, and they'd have to maintain it from then on. Our neighbors really pushed us on taking responsibility of the hedge. They were scared of people letting their dogs poop there. So, seeing as their argument seemed logical, my parents said okay to the offer. This is when the trouble started. The first 2 weeks were pretty good. I earned a few bucks cutting it with some shears. When I went to cut the hedge in the third week, I noticed that on the side of my neighbor's house, the hedge had been ridden over with what I presume would be a car. My dad thought it'd be a one-time thing. Well, he was wrong. Our neighbors kept on destroying the hedge and would never acknowledge they were in the wrong. Until one day, they'd nearly driven over half the hedge. My dad actually lost his marbles. He went to the construction store and bought about 7 sheets of 4-meter-long metal plates. That weekend, my dad and I spent about 4 hours bending the plates to fit in a good turn around the edge of the hedge. We then replanted the entire hedge, which took about 2 hours, and placed the metal fence inside of the hedge, and we went back inside and waited. Literally half a day later, they wanted to get out of their driveway, and they saw we had a hedge again, which was of course unacceptable. When they tried to drive it over again, they got stuck on the metal wall. We didn't notice it until our doorbell was rung aggressively. Me and my dad went to open the door, and the first thing our neighbor said was, "What the F, a-hole? What the F did you do to my car?" My dad calmly said, "Well, slow down," neighbor's name. "I didn't do anything to your car." "Well, how the F did my car get stuck on your hedge?" "Well, why was your car even in my hedge?" "Well, you still broke it. I'm effing suing you." "Of course you will." My dad slammed the door in his face, and I could hear my neighbor still screaming on the other side of the door. He ended up not suing us, but he still hates us. The wall is still in the hedge, and our neighbor still hates us. Worth it. These are my favorite types of revenge stories, because the neighbors always react like the garbage person they are and can't handle the fact that they were in the wrong. And our last story. Got someone fired through a Google review. I used to work at a sub shop with this girl who was literally all drama. She would actively talk crap about me, and it's ultimately why I quit working there. A week or two after I quit, I went in for a sandwich, and this girl literally stopped what she was doing and walked across the line to talk crap about me. Which isn't that big of a deal because IDGAF what people say about me, for the most part, but there's no barrier between guest and workers. I assumed I wasn't the only person who heard her call me pathetic. I went back to my car and posted a Google review as a bystander with a name drop, and corporate fired her the very next day. My boss hired me back immediately, and he never suspected it was me who posted the review. I never really cared much on getting revenge, but wow, that felt good. Revenge, a dish best served cold, with pickles and Southwest sauce on urban cheese bread. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.